Hey everybody, welcome. We've got some great content for you today. My name is Jimmy DeGroat, and my co-host is Brad Huskin. Say hi, Brad.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. How was everybody doing out there?
They can't respond to you, but I
I
can,
know
so
that.
I'm doing good. Uh, Quick story, if for those of you that are with us, quick story about how we came to be in this situation. We are Jimmy DeGroat and Brad Huskin with Jewelry Store Training Institute or jewelrystoretraining.com. And as it happens, I've been in the jewelry business for about 20 plus years. And one thing, ownership, general managers, sales manager, that type of thing. And I stepped out of it for a brief time, but a jeweler in Green Bay, Brian Rouse at Bay Area Diamond Company, gave me a call and said, "Hey, you own a video production here in Green Bay. And so you're right in Green Bay. Would you stop by my store once a week and give me some training?" And the thought was, hey, we're doing pretty good, but what would happen if we actually trained our team? And Brian had known me from the past because I'd worked with Brad Huskin and worked with several other trainers in the business and hired them for our stores. And so Brian thought, hey, you could bring some of that knowledge. And so a little light went on in my brain, and I thought, hey, I own a video production company, so let's produce a video once a week and send it to jewelry stores all over the world. And so that's what basically jewelry store training is. It's a 10-minute training video teaching teams everything from sales techniques to personal trade to operations, all kinds of things. Basically, Brad and I have over 400 training videos in our docket right now. And I say Brad and I because I was the guy that said, "Hey, I know how to do this, but I know how to do it because Brad Huskin taught me and trained in our stores." So basically, this is really easy because we're training, or I'm training from things that Brad taught me how to do and things that I've done. So I'm excited about it. And so I always like to tell people, Jimmy DeGroat comes from your side of the counter. So Brad, tell us who you are.
Well, I'm Brad Houston. I have a company called IAS Training and partnered up with Jimmy about 2.5 years ago. And it's been a very interesting relationship and very rewarding relationship. Let me just say that. So we're now celebrating our 25th year of training in the jewelry industry and couldn't be happier. And in 25 years, the changes in this industry have been outrageous, and how things have progressed and how things have changed. And especially in the last 2 months, things have
Oh yeah,
changed dramatically.
little
And that's
change.
where training is getting more and more and more important, because we've got to have a staff of professionals and not a staff of retail clerks.
Absolutely.
And professionals are those that actually generate sales. So we need to teach our people how to generate sales and not just sit back in their ivory palace and wait for customers to come in. We got to go out and get them. So that's
We,
kind of the focus of today's
yep.
presentation. Right, Jimmy?
Yep, you betcha. You betcha. And we've got a whole bunch of content. So I'm going to feel guilty at the end of this for talking too much, and so is Brad, but we got to dive right into it right now. So, the goal, we've always, as a jewelry store partner and general manager myself, I've always thought, how do we get people to act like I do? When it comes to creating relationships and creating business, how do we get them to kind of be on when they're out there, when they're in here, and take advantage of those opportunities and maximize those? So I was driving in this morning and I just thought of the word jewelrypreneurs. So we want to create tons and tons of jewelrypreneurs, and my hope is that we don't have just a whole lot of owners watching us. My hope is we have a lot of sales managers and a lot of salespeople watching us, because we're going to give you a lot of little golden nuggets today on how you can grow your own personal business. So, and I think we can all agree that this is more important now than ever. One of my fears is that as we start opening up, I know in Wisconsin today we're opening up jewelry stores with social distancing and a limit of 5 people in the store at a time. But My fear is that we open up and then we kind of get satiated thinking, oh, good, we're back to business as usual. We can keep doing the stuff we did. You can't. You can't. You do not have license to do that anymore because we have to be excellent. We have to be amazing at what we're talking about today, at building personal trade. So, yeah, and I think you'll all agree that we do have to be amazing at this. We can't settle for the average anymore in our people and in ourselves. So, and then, you know, creating great personal trade is really all about creating good habits. And those are the things Brad and I are going to be talking about today is habits, 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 doing it over and over again. And then, of course, realizing, when we look at the idea of building personal trade, we can look at how we started the business. Remember, you started the business? I remember Nancy Schuring over in Mahwah, New Jersey, started her jewelry store by laying out colored gemstone jewelry on her bed in her upstairs apartment. And people would, she would invite, she was a teacher. And so she would make jewelry and how we started with all those relationships. What a beautiful story. And so the idea is how do we get our people to work like we did then, building habits, shaking hands, building those relationships. And then when we look at our business, of course, it's easy to see that most of our business comes from 20 to 25% of our customers. I think, Brad, you said it. What's the number? 60, 70% of our business comes from our top
Yeah,
20?
it's amazing that 60 to 70% of a jewelry store's business comes from 20-25% of its customer base,
Right.
which just emphasizes the fact that if we want to grow the business, I call it back to the future retailing, as you were just
Yes.
alluding to,
Yeah. Yeah.
is that we got to get back to what made us successful in developing relationships so that customers, when they have a gift giving need, then you and your store comes to mind first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to start off with sort of a checklist of things that we need to, check off our list to make sure that we have set up and ready to go for allowing our people to build the best personal trade. And the first thing on the checklist I would recommend is really what's your attitude about this? Are you a store owner or manager that's ready and willing to accept giving your people the personal freedom that it takes to do this type of thing? And I only say this because I've been in several jewelry stores where people won't allow people to have stools and sit down. They won't allow people to be involved in the types of creative things like this. They want people straightening cases and retagging rings and things like that. They want people doing the physical things. And that's probably not our mindset, but I'm just say that because there may be a few people out there that are like that. So we need to adjust our mindset to allow people to be jewelrypreneurs. I like that word. It's kind of funny to say within our store. And we need to be willing, of course, to pay them. We need to be willing to pay them to create sales. Now, that's a whole another 2 webinars in itself, and the discussion is how do we pay them? And Brad has some great ideas for that. I've got some great ideas for that. Our contact information is all going to be in our notes, and we're going to share our notes with you at the end of the meeting. So we've got a lot of bullet points in here. So the idea is, we have to be willing to reward them for going, I'm not going to say above and beyond, but for doing their job and doing it well. Next is the physical. And I think this is a big area that we really need to look at and take seriously. A good friend of ours, Jim Woodard, down in Tennessee, built a jewelry store, and he asked me for my advice on it. And I said, Jim, you got to have workstations for everybody. You got to have a place where they can sit down with a phone and a computer and be a normal human being. And I realize that this is a strong suggestion. In some stores, it's just not doable. We're operating in a basically a shoebox, and we don't have a spot for a nice desk, right? But this is all part of giving the people the tools that they need to be successful. And I'll be honest with you, I've worked in stores where people are expected to build personal trade and to do business out of a Rubbermaid container. And it just doesn't work that well. And of course, they can't sit down and relax and do the types of things that are needed, for example, on the computer. Now, this whole personal trade thing isn't about sitting down and relaxing, but it's about having a space where you can get in that mindset to do that. My suggestion, if you have a private space, even better, because in this world today, we're seeing a lot of Zoom meetings. We're going to see a lot of this type of electronic customer confrontation interaction, and a private room is good to have for those. So, ideal if you can set up workspaces for people with a computer, a telephone, the things that they need to do their job. It's huge. It's huge. And then, of course, having the equipment, having a good camera, having a lot of stores have their own phone that they use, their own personal phone, meaning it's their store phone, and they do a lot of their communication with that, whether it's shooting social media videos, etc. But having the hardware that you need to do that is very important. So we've talked about mindset, we've talked about the physical setup, and do the best that you can to do a physical situation, to have a physical area for people. Now next, let's talk a little bit about the software. And then I'll shut up and I'm going to let Brad go. So software, first of all, emails. Now, please, if you don't have it already, get a URL with your store name in it, so that you could say, for example, you could give out email addresses with jim@dreamjewelers.com. Okay? Don't have timbo327@yahoo. That is it's unprofessional, and a lot of times that's people's personal emails. So you want to set up store emails for all of these accounts and store accounts for all of these types of things. So make sure your URL represents your store. Next, have a great CRM, which is customer relation management, customer retention management. I don't know what CRM stands for. Something like that. But a lot of you are using the Edge, and the Edge is fantastic. One thing about the Edge that I've found is that it's so much better than a lot of us even realize that it is. It's got so many more tools and an amazing functionality. So learn and have a great CRM, customer relation management software. Have a store calendar. Now, this is basic, and it's easy, and it's free. Set up a Google Calendar for your store. I can't stress this enough. A store calendar, everybody's got reminders on their phones. And that's another thing too, is mindset-wise, something to think about. I'm not going to mandate it, but I'm just going to suggest that the ownership and management takes a serious look at how we utilize personal devices on the sales floor, and have rules about them, of course. I advocate it, definitely, but there's a time and place and how we utilize it, and that's for you guys to set up. So where was I? I was talking about a great calendar. A great calendar is amazing. Whenever Brad and I have a meeting or something, I send them a calendar invitation. Whenever your customers have a follow-up day that they say they're going to be in to check the wax or check the wax, to check the drawing. Yeah, we do waxes still. That all gets placed in there. And then in the end, we're going to talk a little bit about how to work with that. But also social media platforms. And again, we want to try to avoid as many people using personal accounts as possible. Use your store accounts. So make sure you've got platforms set up with Instagram and Facebook for your store and how you interact with people. And then, of course, Podium or a similar thing where it's a great chat feature on your website. So many stores I know of in the last 4 or 5 weeks have literally made their day and made their month by having good chat features on their website. So very, very important. So that's all I've got for now, and I'm going to turn it over to Brad when he's talking about the real goal of a customer interaction.
All right, Jimmy. Well, thank you very much. And just to touch a little bit on what Jimmy said about the mindset, I just think that if we can get our salespeople to actually believe and adhere to the fact that they have an opportunity to build their own business within your business, where you take all the liabilities, they get all the benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Then I think we can help increase the professionalism in the store.
Yeah.
And like Jimmy said, it is our job or a salesperson's job to create business. We just cannot sit back and wait for customers to come in because they're not coming.
Mm-hmm.
And where I said earlier, 25% of your business, it's huge. And if in fact we aren't proactively looking to increase our customer base, then we're probably going down instead of going up. So especially now during and after this pandemic, I think that we really have to focus really hard at the real goal of a sales presentation. And the real goal of a sales presentation, contrary to popular belief, isn't to make a sale. The real goal of a sales presentation is to develop what I call personal trade, repeat business, and referral business. And a personal trade customer is one that will come in and proactively ask for you by name. And if a customer comes in and says, Jimmy here, that's going to be a far easier sale than somebody coming in fresh off the street.
Yep.
And while that's easy to say, the application or the instituting of this thought process is a lot more difficult because it takes a lot of hard work to develop relationships. And it may not happen just on the first visit or the second visit, but it will happen over a period of time. But if we can change our mindset to thinking every time a customer walks through this door, I have an opportunity to develop a relationship with that person to make them one of my personal trade customers, because that customer over the lifetime might be worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And I worked with an AGS member. I was telling Jimmy this morning when we were chatting that he's in North Carolina, and May of 2019 was his best May ever. So far this May, he's running up 120% over his best May ever because he's done a great job of developing personal trade and relationships. And where people can't take cruises and they can't go to Europe and they can't do all the travel and the things they used to do, they're buying jewelry instead.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't go on the cruise, well, let me buy her a set of pearls.
Right.
And it's happening, and he's doing a great job. And I just want to stress that, you know, and in a typical mall type jewelry store, a couple comes in, says, we're looking for an engagement ring. And what's the response of the salesperson? Our bridal's right over here.
Round? Do you want round or square?
Round or marquee, or you want white gold or yellow gold, or,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. You go into a independently owned store and a couple says, we're looking for an engagement ring. We go, oh, wow, congratulations.
Yep.
Our bridal's right over here. And I think we just need to take that a little bit further and start developing the relationship right up front. Excuse me, where we say, oh, wow, congratulations. How did he pop the question? Where are you guys going on your honeymoon? What kind of plans do you have for the wedding?
Mm-hmm.
And just take it a little bit further and take a personal interest in our customers.
Yep.
And repeat customers are your lifeblood. They may not quite be personal trade yet, but they're on their way. It's the person that knows you, knows the store, and they trust the store, and they come back over and over again. So we've got to get those people to be personal trade, where they actually think of you individually. And that, again, is the process of creating relationships. And referral business, I think that's a huge untapped resource in most stores that I go into, is that we're not asking for referrals or recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that scares the dickens out of me, excuse me, is I'll be in a jewelry store.
I was going to say, I think we sometimes pass referrals off to, oh, that's my Google reviews or my Facebook reviews.
Right. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But
right.
You know, I'll be in a jewelry store and I'll stand up by the POS machine or by the cash grab counter, and it amazes me when a customer's checking out and they're writing a check, they'll say, where am I again? Or who do I make this out to?
Yeah.
And it just tells me that we've done a lousy job of selling ourselves and selling the store, because they don't even know where they are.
Yeah.
And I know that people that are getting engaged tend to hang out with people that are getting engaged. People that buy fine jewelry for Christmas or the holidays tend to hang out with other people that buy fine jewelry as well. Mm-hmm. And we've just got to get our customers asking, or our salespeople asking, for referrals and recommendations, not in a pushing, aggressive way, but in an effective way. Gosh, who else do you know that may be interested in the fine jewelry? Here, let me give you one of my cards. I'd love to meet them as well. So we've got to change that mindset and get our customers or get our sales professionals looking at every time a customer walks through the door as an opportunity to create personal trade, repeat business, and referral business. Because referrals, I mean, I've seen stores that just live on their referrals and their recommendations. And, one person might recommend 10 other people. And before you know it, we've got a snowball's effect going. So we've got to make sure that our staff understands that. We have to get our people to understand that their job is to create sales. And going back to the very basics, and like I was teasing Jimmy because he's up in Green Bay, Vince Lombardi always started every training camp, every season, by holding up a football and saying, "Gentlemen, this is a football." And sometimes we have to do that with our staffs as well, is take them back to the very beginning. And I think one of the things that many jewelers have gotten a little bit lazy is that they count on their computer or their CRM program to capture customers' contact information.
Right.
And I've long said that if you're going to have an effective clienteling process, there are 2 innate problems with it. Number one, your customers don't want to get the phone calls.
Right.
And number
Absolutely.
2,
I
your
don't like
staff
phone
doesn't
calls.
want to make the calls.
Yep.
So how do we get around that seemingly insurmountable problem? Well, it's really simple.
I know.
Tell them, Jimmy.
You get them to ask you to call you.
You get
Call
your
them.
customer to ask you to call them.
That's right.
And if in fact we've taken a personal interest in our customer and they're buying something for Mother's Day in May, and we say, "Well, I'm curious, when's your anniversary?" And the guy says, "Well, it's the middle of June." Then I say, "Well, gosh, while you're here, why don't we go ahead and take a look at some really nice matching coordinating pieces that we have for your anniversary?" If he says, "Well, our anniversary isn't until October," then I'm going to say, "Well, why don't I call you a few weeks before your anniversary so I can offer up some gift suggestions?" And the
he's a
customer
guy.
says, "Oh, I think that would be great." And they've actually given you the permission for the follow-up.
Yep.
So we've got to have some type of a customer profile card, which we'll be more than happy to email you a sample at the end if you just give us your email address, and we'll give you an example of these things. But you need to understand, number one, we don't want to call it a profile card.
Right.
It's a friends and family card or the Diamond Club card or getting to know you. We give it some type of name.
Yeah.
And it's got to be physical. It's got to be something that you can actually hand to the customer and get the customer to fill that out, because typical jewelry stores closing ratio is somewhere around 22-25%. That means 75 to 78% of the people aren't making it to the register to give you that information.
Right.
And that's where I'm adamant about having that physical piece of paper, that physical card, so that our sales professionals have a tool that they can hand to the customer and gather the information.
So Brad, regarding that card is funny because the stores that I've gone in and done training in, they would always say, "Oh yeah, we got those. They're in the back room," and they're in the back room with those old DPS color clarity, cut clarity posters.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So
and there's 2 very important lines on the card, and that's, "Can I contact you?" and "preferred means of contact." And this is what has changed dramatically over the last number of years, is that some people don't want phone calls. They just want emails, or they want text messages. They want contact them on Facebook. So we've got to give them the preferred means of contact, and we've got to start contacting our people that way. Also, I have an entire section devoted to notes. And this is where I'll never forget. I was in Weatherford, Oklahoma, and the owner of the jewelry store picked me up in Oklahoma City, and we're driving to Weatherford. The first stop she wants to make is she wants to take me by her house because we stopped and got some feed on the way from Oklahoma City for her horses. And she wants to introduce me to her horses before she introduces me to her staff. And I didn't really want to meet the horses, but that's a whole different story I don't want to get into. But I met her horses, I pet the horses, and I gave the horses sugar cube. And her goal in life was to sell her store and ride horses professionally. And every time I called her after that, I always said, "Well, how's Comanche doing?"
yeah.
And just that little bit of personal interaction, the fact that I remembered the name of her horses and we talked about her horses, I think was monumental in us developing a very close relationship.
Yep.
And that's why I'm just saying to you guys, we've got to know that information. We've got to know where they went on vacation, how long they've been married, where they work. We need to know if their daughter's a healthcare provider, all those little tidbits of information that we can gather. So when we're calling somebody 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months from now, we can say, hey, Bob, this is Brad over here at ABC Jewelers. Just wanted to follow up with you. You'd asked me to call you. And oh, by the way, how was that hunting trip you and your brother took up to Colorado?
Yeah.
That's where the relationships are developed, is in having those little tidbits of knowledge.
You've won them over. You've won them over if you do that.
Absolutely. And every time they have a gift occasion, they're going to think of you and come to you first. And that's what I call back to the future retailing. And that's where once you get that information on the customer profile card or the friends and family card or whatever you decide to call it, that's where it gets entered into your CRM program with dates and reminders and all the personal notes and all those kinds of things. So there are people actually have the tools where they can generate that added business and the added income and their added commissions and the added profits.
So can I jump in a little bit, Brad, here?
Absolutely. Sure.
Okay,
Back to you, Jimmy.
Well, when you introduced the client information card to us, what we did is we went to a printer and had one printed up. And basically what it was a pad. And, sorry if you're all doing this already, but chances are you're not. We had a pad made up that was a half a sheet of paper, and it was, on the top, we could rip one off. Because I'm a guy, you know how it is. You talk to somebody, you introduce yourself, they tell you their name. I forget their name within the first 30 seconds. So I would always approach a customer, always. I always liked my little tray with my tools, my loop, my tweezers and things like that. I kind of walked around with that, had a looper on my, on a lanyard. But I always had that customer pad with me. And if you go to some stores that are diligent about this, they have pads everywhere. So that's not a weird thing. It's not an awkward thing looking for, oh wait, shut up, don't talk. I got to get a pad. We don't have to do that to a customer. So I would approach a customer with a pad and I would actually start taking some notes as they were talking. Now, not immediately, of course, but you get into the conversation a little bit. You talk about, Brad often talks about the non-business conversation, right? Creating a friendship.
Absolutely.
Which is huge. But I've always found that customers were honored when I started taking notes. And I could always just, laugh it off to, hey, I'm a guy, I forget this kind of stuff. So I just gotta write this down. And then oftentimes what would actually happen is the customer would start filling it out and start writing themselves because they want to give us the information. They're happy with where this relationship is going. So, but Brad just said a key thing that I really want to point out. And if this is the first step, and if you got nothing else from this training today to do this, is to go immediately to the computer and the computer could be the edge, okay? It could be whatever software system that you have for point of sale and customer information. But immediately going to the computer and then putting those dates and those anniversaries, but also make sure that they're in your Google Calendar so that you get pop-up reminders a week before or 2 weeks before, that type of thing. And those pop-up reminders are huge. They're amazing. And if we get in the good habit of putting those key dates in, we had a wonderful salesperson named Kelly up at Jim Kreshock Jewelers in Wausau. And Kelly was a barista. And sometime during the first couple years of her selling, a light bulb went off in her head and said, if I create relationships with these people, I'm going to do much better financially. So, sorry, Brad, I'm kind of taking over here a little bit, but I'm just giving an example of putting into place right after you trained. Okay, so I'm glorifying you a little bit. But what Kelly did is she would send them cards for their anniversary. She would go to Hallmark. She would buy stuff. She didn't just use customers or our store stationery. She went out of her way. She wrote songs. She wrote poems for people. She worked it like crazy. And I'll tell you what, her business, when she ended up leaving the jewelry store for personal reasons, family reasons and things. It was devastating because she had created so many relationships with people in such a great way. Why am I saying that? Because immediately when a customer walked out of the door, and a lot of times we know with an engagement sale, it's not immediate. It's not in the till right away, right? It's that thing that we have to develop. Maybe they got to come back. I'm not suggesting that we condone that. Of course, we always want to try to get the sale right away. But what Kelly would do is she would immediately go to the register or go to the computer, put those key dates in there. Oh, they're going on a cruise this date. They're doing this on this date. And then she would contact them right before that for non-sales reasons, just to say hi and create that relationship. And I'll tell you what, her business blew up. It just went crazy. As a matter of fact, I wrote about her in a recent AGS article. But you know, if we can get people to start these habits, very, very simple physical habits of just putting things in a calendar, they'll figure out what to do when they get the reminder in the calendar. So
Yeah, let me jump in here too, Jimmy, and just
I'm
say
done.
that
I'm done with that.
the success or failure of this program lies in how your people introduce this process.
Right.
If the salesperson says to a customer, "Do you want to be on our mailing list?" What's the answer going to be?
I'm laughing.
No, thank you. I get enough junk mail to begin with. But if they say, "Geez, I'd love to keep a record of your past purchases so I could
Right.
offer up gift suggestions into the future, would you mind filling this out for me?"
Right.
Or so you're not shopping at the last minute for her birthday like you did your anniversary. Why don't I call you a couple of weeks?
Or
Or to
texting.
maintain the warranty, or to
Yep.
remind you in 6 months when it's time to have your ring cleaned and checked. Or, we always have some special events going around the holidays. I'd love to be able to send you a personalized invitation. So it's a training issue that we got to train our people how to introduce these things and how to ask the right questions, get the preferred means of contact, and capture some kinds of personal information as well. And Jimmy said that the calendar is vitally important. If you tell somebody you're going to call them 2 weeks before their wife's birthday, then you better call them 2 weeks before the wife's birthday, or they're going to be mad at you when they forget.
Yep.
So we got to make sure that we follow through on these things. And statistically, we have to track our statistics.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So closing ratio is, of course, the most important number that there is. But I can tell you that I worked with a store in the Detroit area, and we implemented this program, and it became a non-negotiable standard that their people had to make 5 appointments per week via the telephone, via email, via text message, via some type of contact with that customer. They were doing it, and of the 5, they closed 3 of them at an average of $1,500. So each salesperson was adding $4,500 in sales to the bottom line. There were 8 salespeople at this time. So they're adding over $35,000 a week through their ability to clientele with their customers. And 35,000 times 52 weeks, it's $1.5 million in added revenue just by doing an effective job using the telephone. So we got to track our statistics, because people improve what you inspect, not what you expect.
Right.
Now let's talk about a few ways that we can get more people into the store. And like I said earlier, I think that number one is we have to train our people how to ask for referrals. And again, not in a push and aggressive way, but geez, if you know anybody else that's interested in fine jewelry for the holidays, I'd love to talk to them as well. Or if your daughter knows anybody else that may be graduating, that's in need of a graduation gift or getting married or whatever the case may be, just asking for referrals and hanging them 2 or 3 of your business cards. I think that business cards are vital. And I think that a sales professional always has 35, 40, 50 business cards on them at any given time. And at one of the jewelry trade shows, I just happened to have a booth next to Podium, which you mentioned a couple times, Jimmy. And they said that the average human being comes in contact with 100 new people every month. That's huge. That's 1,200 people per year, new people that we've never encountered before. And if somebody says, "Oh my gosh, those earrings are gorgeous," just give them your card. Say, "Gosh, ever interested in fine jewelry? I work over at this store. Come see me sometime." and just pass out your business cards to everybody that you come in contact with, because you just never know where that next customer is going to come from,
Yep.
whether it be the bank teller or the grocery clerk or the cop writing you up a ticket. Here, I'd like to rake some up on you someday. Here's my card. And you never know. They just might come back in.
Yep.
So I think we need to encourage our people to network and just get involved in something, whether it be their kids' soccer team or your church group organization or the breast cancer awareness, or no matter what it is. And, this is just something that I absolutely, truly believe in, is that if you put good noogies out there in the world, good noogies are going to come back to you. Mm-hmm. And that's, my wife, I'm very proud of her. I mean, every year she contributes to a battered women's shelter, and she puts together gift bags for every battered woman that's in the shelter and for abused children. And, she goes to the dollar store and we buy 48 of these and 48 of these and 48 of these. And, we just drive the cashiers crazy. Yeah. But it's just putting good back into the world. And I think that the more good you can put back in the world, the more successful you're going to be.
Well, and a lot of that too, Brad, is just, that's all, we want to get them to do the things that we did to start the business.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So,
no question about it. And that's what I mean by some form of networking.
Yep.
And then providing such exceptional customer service that it absolutely causes word of mouth advertising. Mm-hmm. And just Mother's Day, we my wife and I have a breakfast place that we love to go to. And of course, they're closed down. So we decided we'd have a Mother's Day parking lot breakfast. So we went to the restaurant, we ordered our thing via the phone, and she brought it out to us. And she was just a warm, caring, loving individual that just gave us great service. And, those kinds of things get remembered. And everybody that I will come in contact with here in Denver, if you want a good parking lot breakfast, go to Sunrise Sunset, because the staff there is just spectacular. And I think we can do that as well and get people talking about us and the experience and creating more word of mouth advertising.
Well, and how many great restaurants don't even need to advertise? They're busy every Friday and Saturday night just because they're the talk of the town. We can be
Absolutely.
That way.
Yeah, if they've got a big red sign flashing seating available on a Friday or Saturday night, pre-virus, yep, then something's wrong with that restaurant, because they shouldn't have seating available on a Saturday night.
Right. That's right.
Anyway.
So Brad, can I tell a quick story regarding that?
Sure.
And I promise it'll be real quick. I started at the jewelry store at Avenue Coins and Jewelry in 1996. It was January 3rd. And the day I started, half the staff was gone because they were all going to Hawaii. And I'm like, what the heck? What's that? And they said, well, when we hit a certain volume, we said everybody gets to go to Hawaii. So they're just taking their turn. And I said, okay, what happens when we do the next number? Okay, and that happened to be twice that volume. It was $2 million. And they said, well, I suppose we go to Hawaii as well. So I said, I'm going to Hawaii next year. Anyway, short story short, we all decided that we were going to raise our customer experience. We were all going to raise our personal trade and our clienteling, and we were going to raise that level. And we threw that out there again, and they hit it. They doubled in 1 year. So anyway,
that's where there's been lots of webinars and talks and seminars about millennials. Mm-hmm. And I think millennials are just human beings, and they just want the experience. Yep. They want to be able to put it on Instagram. They want to put it on Facebook. They want to put it out there on social media. And you've got to be willing to be a part of that story and a part of that experience as well. Yep. And be there to take the pictures and have your phones and do the videos. And, I've been in stores where people have actually proposed in the store and made a big deal out and made a video out of it. And it's on Instagram. Mm-hmm. You can't beat that kind of press. So. And the fifth and final way to get more people into the store is through clienteling, and as we've been talking about. And again, just reemphasize, you've got to use the customer's preferred means of contact today. Mm-hmm. Because I personally don't want phone calls, because I don't want that interruption, because, I may be in a store doing training. If my phone's going off, then, I don't want that interruption. If you want to contact me, then text message me. Right. And I can answer that text at my convenience. but I
Yep.
don't want emails either, because I get so gosh darn many emails
Yeah.
that,
Don't see
you
them.
know, I just go through and hitting the delete. But everybody's different. Somebody will want email, somebody will want text, somebody will want Facebook messages, some will want the phone calls.
Yeah.
But the last thing we want to do is um, violate what their preferred means of contact is.
Yep.
And so we got to have that physical system set up within our stores and get out there and create some business, because there's going to be a lot of business out there,
Well, and
because
Brad,
people
yes.
can't spend the money on the cruises and on the trips and
Yep.
all those other things that they're used to spending it on. So they might as well spend it on jewelry, for crying
Right.
out loud.
Yep. And I think we could probably wrap it up by, so we got a bullet point list of things to do, things to make sure that we've got in place. But understanding what Brad initially started talking about is 75% of the people walking out of our door is a real opportunity, and we're past the point where that can just happen. That can be the accepted means of business anymore. We've got to increase that number. We've got to increase that closing ratio. And one way we do that is we build these relationships by maximizing and capitalizing on that person being in our store and getting their information and creating those relationships. Because that's what
Absolutely.
everybody wants. They want that wow experience. And then the first habit to build, well, after all of that, we've taken notes. And by the way, I was showing a blank piece before. If you don't have a customer information card, start with this. Okay, start this afternoon with this, because you don't have to wait for your program to start. This all I got to do is take notes on a white sheet of paper on your store stationery. So, and then go immediately to the computer and start creating a system for follow-up with your customers. But yeah, Brad, you always say, what was I going to say? I was going to close with a very inspirational thought from Brad Houston, and that is,
Well, if you can surround yourself with human beings that want to get better as individuals and better as professionals, then you cannot help but be successful.
yep,
And the number one thing people want out of their jobs today is the skills, ability, and knowledge to be successful. And if you're not giving your people those skills, ability, and knowledge in order for them to be successful, then I put the fault on you.
yeah,
But it all goes back to training. We're in the business of hiring and training people for the rest of their lives.
yeah.
And gosh, I wish we'd have been able to make this presentation at AGS here in my hometown of Denver, but stuff happens, and that didn't work out. So I'm very glad we were able to do it via webinar. And Jimmy, any closing thoughts?
Okay, I've just put Jim at jewelrystoretraining.com in the chat. And I'd love to get you all the notes for this. And Brad and I have a sample of the client card. One of the questions in the question and answer was, what CRM do you suggest and why? And the thought there was, I've always found the edge to be what I need. If I learn of anything else other than that, that's amazing, great. But I've always found that we can get what we need and accomplish what we need to out of the edge. But also, as you develop the system within your store, your people may prefer a certain system. Go with that. Okay, go with that. Go with what they're comfortable with, because if you want to enable them to do this, right, you want them to be comfortable with it. So
Yeah, and there are lots of them out there. There's Telemagic, and there's Goldmine, and there's Act, and there's Salesforce, and all those things. But
yeah,
the most important thing to remember is there's got to be a place for name, address, phone number, email address,
yep,
those kinds of things.
yep,
Notes, so that we can take personal information, and like Jimmy has been stressing, a calendar, so
yep,
that we can actually set it up so that we have a system by which we can follow up. And
yep.
I was telling him about the story in Detroit, and I forgot the end of the story. Is it took us 3 years to get to the point where we could make it a non-negotiable standard that they had to make 5 appointments per week, because
Yeah,
we didn't have a big enough base of people that had asked us to call them.
right.
But man, once we got to that point, it was immensely successful. And that's what Jimmy just stressed. You got to start somewhere, even with, if it's a sheet of paper this afternoon, start the process, start the program to get to that point where you're generating millions of dollars in sales and not waiting for people to come through the door.
Well, and that's another thing too, is what we did is we just said, hey, let's start doing this. And we figured it out. We waded through the weeds and figured out our own system. There's systems out there and you can pay stupid money for a lot of things. But Phil Boson just had I lost it. It went away. But I can't remember what he suggested for a CRM system that he likes. But Phil had it in the chat there. Anyway, but the moral is don't wait for this to be perfect. Client book. It's called Client Book.
Client book, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen them at the trade shows around the jewelry industry, and that's a very effective program as well. So
thanks, Phil.
Absolutely.
But don't wait on this. Start now. Start today. And get this video, get this webinar, and if your people haven't seen it, show them. And just decide you're going to start doing this, start diving into it, and figure out this system. We've given you some great hints, a checklist of things to do, things to consider, and this could go on for another 24 hours, I know, because there's a ton more information here. But my encouragement to you is just get in and start doing it. I don't care if you're writing stuff on paper or putting things on an Excel spreadsheet. If you're comfortable with that, great. But just whatever it is, do it and dive in, because we can't settle for people just walking in the door anymore. And that'll happen. But for our business to go through the roof, to double and triple in sales, let's just work on this, these raving fans. Let's build raving fans, right?
Well, and I'll just say a couple of things in that, the jewelry industry has shrunk over the past 25 years tremendously.
Over the past 5 years.
The last 5 years, and I would guess that trend's going to continue, especially with the effects of this virus.
Yep.
But it is the companies that consistently implement good, sound business principles. They're going to not only survive, but they're going to thrive.
Right.
And having a good clienteling or customer-based program is one of those good, solid business principles.
Yep.
So,
all right, guys.
I just did want to say, any questions that come up after this webinar, don't hesitate to email either one of us. We'll be more than happy to answer them, because we're sheltering at home.
Yeah. So I'm going to, in the chat, by the way, I'm just going to put, it's jim@jewelrystoretraining.com. I'll put my phone number in there as well. And whoops, there we go, 920-492-1191. And Brad and I, there's my information. But send me an email and I'll send these notes to you. And then, of course, all that contact information will be in there. And then, hey, you know what? Sign up for jewelrystoretraining.com, where your people can be looking at information just like this on a weekly basis in a weekly 10-minute video. So the time is now for excellence, and let's do it. All right, I'm done.
Thanks, everybody.
See you later.